The grandson of legendary Chuck Jones is in studio with me today to talk about all things Coyote versus Acme, as well as an event alongside the Chuck Jones Gallery. And we are here to get you excited about that event coming up on the 25th of the month. So, of course, you realize this means podcast. Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on for a while now and talk about Wile E. Coyote and your grandfather's legacy with that character. But this is the perfect time for that because we're promoting Coyote versus Acme, and you've got to see the film. I've gotten to see the film, so we can have an open conversation about it for the fans. But I
Yeah.
also want to uh, let people know that the Chuck Jones Gallery is doing amazing work for your grandfather's legacy and, celebrating the artwork as well as modern artists that are coming in and adding to that legacy. Can you talk a bit about finding the right artist for continuing that legacy and continuing to work with these characters?
I can, but first of all, that was beautiful. I'm
Oh,
just going to say that was a perfect background for what we're talking about. Um, and I think the when Chuck passed away, because he was still creating, still drawing, still painting up until late 2001, and he passed away in February of 2002. And he he had this ability to really tap into something new all the time. And so after he passed, it was a while before we decided, and Chuck wanted this to happen. I mean, he talked about other people utilizing his characters. He loved the way that Eric Goldberg used his characters and drew, and he really identified Eric Goldberg as probably the greatest living two-dimensional animator of our time. And there were others. He was like, this is so difficult. And someone at the Center for Creativity said, no, you got to pick one. And he goes, "Oh, okay, well, if I have to pick one, it's Eric Goldberg right now." But as we go forward, one of the things that we look for is someone who's passionate about the characters and someone who wants to bring those characters into their art world. Because we never want anybody, and Chuck would never want someone to try to copy what he did because
sure.
that was his source and his ability to take the characters that he knew and loved so much and bring them into his fine art, into his world. And so when I talk to somebody or we review somebody's portfolio, the idea is that they've got their own artwork, they've got their own style, they've got their own world of art, and that they're passionate about the Looney Tunes characters and they have the desire to bring the characters into their world. And so,
I love that.
especially when Ben Olsen and now most recently Steve Barton and Dan Bowden and others that we've worked with. We still work with Eric Goldberg and others. That the idea is, how do they live in the world of Ben Olsen? How do they? And I met Ben in 2009 at an art show that I did out near Chicago where he lived, and it was an immediate spark of like his passion. He's a creative director. He's a fine artist. He was going down the path of animation, and it was just this combustion. I think it was about 2009 or something like that.
Sure.
And then eventually we stayed in touch. He started coming out to art shows, and he started, sharing some of his artwork. But there was this, he could see the characters in his world, in his mind. And so, and that is a tie-in perfectly to Acme or Coyote versus Acme. That was one of my favorite things about this film is that we all sort of know that the Looney Tunes characters exist in our realities, in
Right.
each of our minds, and the way that we envision them, and they're part of our life. And that so seamlessly, this movie, for the first time, I think, has ever just said, you know what, of course the Looney Tunes are here, and they're just hanging out around us, and we all interact with them in our own way. And when I got done seeing it for the first time about 4 weeks ago, that was exactly my takeaway. Was that's the way I see the world. The Looney Tunes are just part of it. It's just sort of this other dimension. So
Yeah,
that's the way I'm always looking. And as Chuck said, when he would see somebody who could really hone their craft, in the case of a painter, and, not to be a bit crass, but Chuck would say, "Oh, that guy can paint his ass off." And so that would, and so that's literally when I find somebody who's got that talent and the passion, the understanding of the characters, because those are all things that come together, and then we go, okay, let's start to explore together.
I love that. It's a good mesh of worlds, and you wanted to have an artist who is true to themselves before you brought them into the world of Looney Tunes. But also, that is a good point. It is our world. They did caricatures. They brought the world of the 40s into their cartoons back in the day, and we're just continuing that with this live action hybrid format. But it's
Yeah.
the same kind of idea. And I love that you said Eric Goldberg because he is obviously a phenomenal artist, but he also just became inducted into the Disney family with that Disney Legacy title, and long
He's now a
overdue.
legend. He is now
Yes,
officially a
yes.
legend. We've always said he was a legend. Chuck knew it ahead of time, but now he's been named as a Disney legend. Yeah,
Yeah, and if there was Warner Brothers Legends, he would be in that too, you know? Like he
very true.
he is part of that family. He worked behind the scenes on the animation for Back in Action.
Yep.
And I was just curious because you've been around for all of the theatrical releases as well, alongside Chuck. Do you have any memories of seeing the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie or Space Jam
Oh
the first
yeah.
time? What was that like?
Well, I tell you, when we the Roadrunner Bugs Bunny movie was a great example of Chuck still wanting to produce and still wanting to utilize the characters, but obviously no one had the budgets to do these things,
Yeah.
and so one using his classic films, but being able to do the bridges and the new animation that was really fun for him, and that there was an
Wow.
appetite to go to the movie theaters and see them on the big screen like they were meant to be. That's what they were. I mean, I remember back when I went to go see the Phantom Tollbooth for the first time, and I was like 8 years old, and we went to
Wow.
Hollywood, and it was during that time in 1970. The late 60s, early 70s, when everything was starting to taper off as far as animation. And I remember the distributors for the Phantom Tollbooth went, you know what? Disney has given up on animation, and we shouldn't really do anything with it. And if you look at that, the animation in there, I mean, you've got all the great animators from Warner Brothers on there. You've got Mel Blanc, you've got the backgrounds that are Maurice Noble. It is one of the most classic pieces of animation. And then fast forward, I mean, you were talking about Back in Action, and Joe Dante and Chuck were dear friends and
Yeah.
really loved working together. Chuck did cameos in many of his film, Inner Space and Gremlins and all these
Gremlins
things. And
2 is
so
my favorite.
it is a cult film. I mean, it is just go
Yes.
back forth. But Chuck, when they wanted someone to do the characters, and Eric Goldberg was available, and that he respected the characters. We went on to the set of that film back in whenever that 2007 or 8 or 9 or whenever it was that it was released. I'm already forgetting. But
2003 was Back in
was it
Action.
was it really?
It was,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, that's mind-blowing. But got to go on the set as they were doing the filming and got to go to all the anyway, it was a magical time to see how they did this whole thing. And I really thought that the animation in there that Eric did was phenomenal. I mean, it was a difficult place to work at that point. I don't mean like culture-wise. I just mean there were so many hands in the pot trying
Yeah.
to make this thing work, and no one really knew what to do. And so, but that to me, Eric Goldberg was like he fought tooth and nail, and he did some of the voices on there as well. And by the way, if you don't know, Eric can do almost all of the character voices himself.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Oh yeah,
That's
if you ever get a
fantastic.
chance, in fact, I'll see if I can find it. I don't think he'd mind if I share it at some point. At our Chuck Jones' 100th birthday celebration at the Center for Creativity back in Costa Mesa in 2012. Um, he he sang Kilda Wabbit as Bugs Bunny
Wow.
in, I mean, it was one of the greatest renditions, and he nailed it. I mean, it was, he can do the voices, he can do, but they wouldn't let him do the voices on Back in Action because, as he said, that's like giving the keys to the kingdom. And he goes, they weren't ready to do that for him.
Got
So
it.
they let him do a few characters, but yeah, obviously now Eric Bauza has the keys to the entire kingdom, and rightfully so, because he, in this, in all the other films, he is taken over where nobody else has been able to go.
Yeah, he really taps into something Mel Blanc was doing, and it's phenomenal to have him a part of this legacy as well, especially this film and getting to voice Bugs Bunny for the first time theatrically. I love it. But going back to the Centennial, I was actually in attendance in Glendale
Oh,
when they
that,
had
yeah,
that initial showcase of his work, and you got up on stage and
yep,
you talked about how Chuck always wanted to start with Bully for Bugs, which I'm wearing
yep.
currently.
Yeah,
There's a
I see that. That's great.
and I kind of adapted that into the podcast a little bit because I started with Bully for Bugs, but I got to meet June Foray there,
Yeah,
and I didn't get to meet you. But this whole thing, I was talking to Dan Sinker, who's also going to be a part of this event coming up next week, this
yep,
week if you're listening to this right now.
yeah.
And he has written the book 75 Years of Coyote and Roadrunner, and now it's in the 78th year. But I was just reminiscing about going to that and this trajectory. I never thought I would be sitting here talking to you and having this celebration of this character with this film. But the first time I met you was at the brick and mortar Chuck Jones Gallery in San Diego for Comic Con in 2013. And I
Wow,
walked,
was it that long ago?
it was
Holy
that long
smoke.
ago. I walk
That's
in
amazing.
and you come up to me, and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it clear as day. You asked me what my favorite short was that your grandfather did.
Okay.
And I was just my jaw was on the floor looking at all the art, and I was like, I cannot even believe there is a place that is celebrating this, let alone is being run by the grandson of the legendary director. And then you asking me that question, I was just taken aback because I was like, I have to pick one. Like there's so many great shorts to pick from. How can I just pick one? But
Yeah.
I love that we've gone on this journey together. We've seen each other at different stops along the way, and here we are.
Bugs Bunny the
And
Symphony in Las Vegas. I remember
yes,
clear as day. That was one of the touch points most recently. So,
yes, absolutely. Something else that Chuck was very an
yeah.
advocate for was keeping the music alive, you know?
Yep.
Carl
Yep.
Stalling, Milt Franklin, keeping those compositions in people's ears and matched to the cartoons perfectly. Yeah, so it's just been an honor to go on this journey with you. But speaking of Dan Sinker, did
Yeah.
you get to read that book when it first
Yeah.
came out?
Yeah.
And are people,
So it is a masterpiece. I mean, it is one of those that it it takes a while to really dig in and get into it because there's so much research and there's
Mhm.
so much detail, and but he does a great service to the history and the viewpoints. He became a good friend with a lot of people associated with Roadrunner and Coyote, and I just literally got off the phone with him not half an hour ago, and
Amazing.
in anticipation of us getting together this week. But a super humble guy, but a guy who is very thoughtful, and so. I think, and one of the great parts of it is this film. I mean, that he interviewed Dave Green, and he really got into how these characters are continuing to uh, impact all of our lives. And that's what's so important, I guess, in my viewpoint of it, is that so many people are celebrating what Chuck did. Really starting in 1947, we've uncovered that he started developing these cartoons in a letter that he wrote to a friend of his, that they had started this whole thing. But I am looking forward. I've never met Dan in person, but I will say I'm looking forward to meeting him, He and Ben are going to hit it off like
Oh
nobody's
yeah.
business. Yeah.
And you mentioned Dave Green. He's the director of Coyote versus Acme, in case you don't know. But if you're listening to this, you probably know that.
Yep. Yep.
um,
And he invited Dan personally. I mean, after this whole thing, they connected, and Dave thought it was appropriate that Dan was there. So a
yeah,
couple months ago, when we found out that Dan was coming out, it's like, well, if you're coming to Southern California, he's never been to California before, let alone to Hollywood,
sure.
and or coming down our way. So
Yeah.
he's a lot of deer in headlights, which I think is great. That we get the opportunity to expose him. I was giving him recommendations since he's going to be down in Newport Beach for the signing, where to go visit. If you got one day down here, what are you going to go see? And so literally I've been drawing him diagrams and telling him what to go visit. And I could just envision him for the first time. It's like, the first time if you can imagine going to Disneyland or going to Warner
Yeah.
Brothers Studio, and you're just like, wow. And I still do that every time I go to Warner Brothers. I'm just like, wow, this is pretty darn cool.
I mean, that was my reaction walking to the Chuck Jones gallery, and it still is every time I see it. And I'm like, how, wow.
Yeah, I still do that quite a bit. I was down in San Diego for Comic-Con this time, and in July,
Yeah.
and it always is something different. And we brought out a few little wonderful things. We had Steve Barton down there for the first time. We just started working with him, and literally I came in and was just like, wow, 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 wow. And it's always new to me as well.
Steve Barton's art has been incredible. I've been sharing it on the Instagram, which you can follow This Meets Podcast. I mean, it's just explosive, is the word I would use to describe it. It flies off the walls, and no wonder they're selling so quickly.
Were you there on Thursday night? I had to leave. I was only there for Wednesday. Were you there on Thursday at his show? Because it really was what you described. It was
I
like they were just saying it was like ba 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 ba.
I was told by Ben that it did that. I
Yeah,
unfortunately wasn't able to make it over
got
there
it.
on
Yeah,
that day,
it
but
it
man,
was
I wish I could
yeah.
have.
Ben was there all the time. He
Yeah.
is our ever present, ever ready bunny, truly. And he will be out here, as I said, for this signing on Tuesday. And he'll be at the premiere. So he was invited by us and Legion M,
Mhm.
who's co-distributing the film, because this poster, this lithograph that we're having on out the event on Tuesday is something that we started talking about, and this is well before either of us even saw the film. And I was, signed and to secrecy, sworn to secrecy when we saw it. And Ketchup brought my mother and me up to take a look at it and get our opinions about it. But you can't talk about anything other than what's in the thing. So I couldn't even tell Ben kind of what the premise was, and you kind of get the understanding from the Coyote versus Acme. But
Yeah.
when he came up with this concept of the fine art of disregard, I was just like, okay, this is so perfect. And there is something so magical about how his brain works and tying in all the little details. And he could go on forever. And now that he is an animation director for Warner Brothers, doing this stuff with Duster, and I know
Yeah.
you
The
know that. I
J.J.
mean, last
Abrams
year.
produced
Yeah,
series.
and that he worked directly with JJ, and he said JJ has an amazing ability to look at details down to a frame at a time. And so what's working, what's not, and it really reminds me of Chuck. It was every frame had to be right. And so
Wow.
Ben said it was an amazing learning experience and pushed him to the limit of him having to be creative and oftentimes redoing things in his own mind so that it would work. And what he did was masterful. And so he's living the
Incredible.
dream as well, which I think is great. I met him he was probably what, 29 years old. I don't think anybody's 29 years old ever. But he's now in his ripe ages of 40 something, and he is flourishing in everything that he does.
Absolutely. And I cannot wait to see him as well at this event.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you and Lisa got to see the film. What was her reaction to Coyote versus Acme?
Yeah. So when Linda and I were going up to, uh, and this was leading up because we got kind of connected with Gareth West and his wife Liz, the owners and the CEO of Ketchup Entertainment, and they invited us up, and we took a little while to get timing for everybody to do this, and we didn't know if it was going to be a general screening. We didn't know what was going up, but we went up to Ketchup Entertainment in Beverly Hills, and we walk in, and as we're driving up there, my mother is really quite nervous about what she's going to say if she doesn't like it.
Mm.
And so, because my mother cannot lie, she's definitely now. My brother was giving her advice, like, you can say things like, "Oh, it's great to see the characters on the big screen," and it's all these different things. And so we were both anticipating, okay, what are we going to say? And we have been disappointed before,
Sure.
and and what was the reason for why Zaslav decided to kill it?
Yeah.
You just have that in there. And I will say, we've got a high bar as far as expectation of character
Understandably.
development, how the characters look, how the personalities behind them. So anyway, we went in, and it turns out it is a screening for two of us. And so we're in the Catch-Up
Wow.
Entertainment private screening room, which is, kind of an oversized conference room with this beautiful screen, and we've got our own private projectionist, and Gareth, leads us in and gets us some sparkling water, which was very kind, and then they start the film, and as we went through, I heard my mother next to me. We laughed at all the right parts. It was the time, everything about it. And Gareth came in about 5 minutes before it ended and just sort of was in the room. We sensed him come back in. And as it stopped and the lights came up, I turned to my mom and said, I don't understand why they got rid of this. That was great. And she said, that's exactly what I was about to say to you. And we then had some time with Gareth and Liz just to review and talk about it. And my mother is probably more, we'll call it discerning about what her expectations are.
Mhm.
And she was tearing up as we were talking about it, that the characters are so true to who they are. It was a brilliant move. I was so glad that the coyote didn't talk, that it was all about the communication as it should be within the disciplines of the Roadrunner and Coyote. The relationships between everybody, as I said before, it's just sort of they're part of our world, and they did that seamlessly. And the quote that my mom said, because they were like asking, they were saying, well, what are your kind of concise thoughts? Because I say nothing concisely. So, but she said, you know what, the truth is Chuck was very clear when he talked about the Roadrunner Coyote, that he said the Roadrunner Coyote would never be able to sustain a feature length film, period.
Mm.
And she reiterated that, and she said he was wrong. And that, I think there was silence in the room after that, and everybody let it sink in. The four of us, were in the room, and it was like, wow, that these guys, that Dave Green and the team that put together everything got it so right that the Roadrunner and Coyote can sustain a feature film so effortlessly that I think it was brilliant.
I love that.
She
And that
loves it.
is a perfect summation of how I feel about it as well. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have this movie. I'm so glad it was saved. When it was when it was announced that it wasn't going to come out for the people to see it, I was devastated.
That
And
was
it was
sad.
a dagger to the heart.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm so glad that they respected you and the family to have that private screening. That is so wonderful, and I feel like more companies should do that. Whether it be Looney Tunes or any other franchise that has a legacy of characters that family's still involved with them. Like, oh, that is a very classy touch.
It
I'm really glad
was
they did that.
it was very kind, and I tell you what, Ketchup Entertainment is terrific. And I, as an aside, I know we're talking about this movie, but I am actually invigorated by what they're doing at Warner Brothers Pictures Animation. and also at the television animation. We met last year. My mother and I went up and met with Sam Register, the president of television animation,
Yeah.
and he's been doing some great things, and he's very passionate about bringing them back. And Warner Brothers feature animation called Warner Brothers Pictures Animation. They just did a short, for Daffy
Daffy
season that
season.
is
Yep.
coming out. It was going to come out earlier this year, and they pushed Cat in the Hat back. So it debuted at ONSEE. We saw some preludes of that, and so they're really focusing on the legacy of it. So I'm invigorated that the Looney Tunes are making this resurgence, and I think they've just it's like a great story that was done, let's say, by Twain or somebody, that if
Yeah.
you take it, it has an ever present, it has
Mhm.
an infinite possibility to bring back out because there's life in there. And so these characters live amongst us. And so now they're just peeking themselves back up out. And I think that's going to happen more and more because people now understand, oh, they're still with us nearly 100 years later.
It's crazy. It's
They're not
crazy. I've
going
been
anywhere.
calling it a lunaissance. We're approaching the lunaissance.
I like that. I'm gonna steal that at some point.
Please do. Please do. So I had one last question for you while I have
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
What has been a place around the world where you've had a fan encounter that has surprised you?
That is an interesting. You mean meeting somebody who is a fan of
Yes.
the whole genre and everything?
Well, because Looney Tunes are universal, they're worldwide, and
Yeah.
there's worldwide appeal, as we've seen. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you've ever traveled to a place, or the Chuck Jones Gallery has been somewhere,
Yeah.
and you've had somebody, and they surprised you with their love or passion for these characters.
Well, I tell you, I have been many, many places, and I mean, whether it's and it was a family, we're avid scuba divers, so we've traveled the world, many places, and you can, even if you don't speak the language very well or no one, the communication. I was in Fiji one time years ago and scuba diving, and we came across a local couple, and it turns out their son was a mad fan of Marvin Martian. And this is in Fiji, and he had all the quotes, and he could do the voices, and they're
Wow.
Fijian people, and it was an amazing sort of thing. It turns out that the woman was a princess. Her father was a king of one of the islands, so when you got
Wow.
that going for you. But they happened to live in
Sure.
a place on the main in Tavarua, and they invited us over, but they had Looney Tunes stuff in their bar, and it was just like this cool little thing. But more recently, Bugs Bunny at the Symphony was in Paris, and
Mm.
so it happened to be over that time that my wife's birthday was, and so it was a great excuse to, hey, honey, you want to go to Paris for your birthday?
Sure.
And
Why
she
not?
said, she said, okay, what's going on in Paris? I said, well, we did the same thing with an anniversary going to
He was on to
Dublin.
you.
I know. And so anyway, but we went there, and it was there there were many times where I don't speak French, they didn't speak English, but we spoke Looney Tunes, and it was they would say what they loved, and people would maybe interpret a little bit what he says as this. And I met a guy who was wearing a Bugs Bunny. He had his ears on, and he had this big t-shirt, and he came in and he gave me this bear hug. He was a fairly large man towering over me, and he just, one of those like almost tear moments where he's like, "You're Chuck Jones' grandson." And it was just this moment of just like, yeah, it's everywhere. It is everywhere in the world.
I love that. I love that. I mean, it's universal, and I love that it's transcending languages now.
Yeah.
Like you
And
can
I
just
think
speak
that's the
Looney
thing
Tunes.
about this Roadrunner Coyote. I think more than just about any other, especially Looney Tunes, that there is no dialogue necessary,
Yeah.
that it's already international. There is no subtitles that need to be done or dubbing that needs to be done to get the intonations and to get the gags. And so, the the what Ben does, you don't need any sort of, you just know what's going on. And I think it's something that Dan hit on, the eternal importance of these characters. And it's hard to tell that they're 70 plus years old. And
Yes.
so I I am so looking forward to Tuesday, and I expect you to be there.
I
That
will be there. I
and
will be
all of
there.
your fans join us there for this double signing. It's signing of the book and signing of the special lithograph poster by
Love it.
Ben. And then, like I said, before the premiere, it's going to be one of those like magical moments. So hopefully everybody will come and visit, and I'll be there. We've got some other hopeful surprise guests that will be there. But if nothing, Dan and Ben together, that's combustion.
It is. It is.
Hopefully,
And
it's not Acme combustion. So I don't
hopefully
know.
not. And if you're listening to this, both Ben Olson and Dan Sinker have been on two different episodes of the podcast. So you can go back in to the timeline and find out where those are and listen to them if you want to hear more about their stories and how they came about to the Chuck Jones Gallery or the book and the history of that. So, Craig, where can people find you online and where can people find out about this event?
So the easiest thing to do, chuckjones.com is everything all the time.
Okay.
And the event is going to be Tuesday, the 25th, from 4:30 to 7 at the Chuck Jones Center for Creativity location, which is the nonprofit version of what we do, which is at 1600 Dove Street, Suite 250. We've got a nice set of office spaces and an open spaces that we're using currently for the Center for Creativity. But on chuckjones.com, if you want to attend, the best way to reserve your spot, because there's limited availability both for books, for posters, and space, is to email client services, all one word, at chuckjones.com. There'll be refreshments and
Great.
fun and laughter and cartoons going, so it's going to be a fun time.
And fun for all ages. You can bring your
Yep,
kids to this
absolutely.
and
We'll have some teaching artists there, so there'll
awesome.
be some drawing and all kinds of things going on throughout. So it's sort of an exposure to the Center for Creativity as well.
Awesome. Well, Craig, thank you so much for your time. I hope people can get out to see it. I will definitely be there. And if you're listening to this, go to chuckjones.com and get your RSVP in. We want to see you there. We want to meet you. And overall, let's celebrate this release of Coyote versus Acme because it almost didn't happen. What a world we would have been in if this didn't happen. I mean, this is such a wonderful movie that gets to the heart of these characters in a way that you've never experienced before. Highly recommend it. Craig, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
And
Jonathan.
as always, that's not all, folks. Have a good day.